But I have been thinking anyway, with the entire Harley lineup that they announced, there's some interesting looking bikes in there. And I wondered if any, because you're a little bit more casual on the Harleys than me, aren't you? I'm quite into it, and I've reviewed quite a few, but for you, it's not really not your bag so much.
No, like I say, they've always intrigued me. They always have some kind of an allure, but I genuinely don't think I'll ever buy one myself. But I know the ones that kind of catch my attention.
So I thought we'd do a little sort of comparison of our picks and have a look at the lineup for this year and pick out 3 bikes we'd actually like to ride. I don't know if you want to go first, mate, with your more kind of mainstream view on it, perhaps. And then
you can tell me where I've gone wrong with it as well, because I'm sure I have. Most of mine is just sort of based on, because like I say, I've only ridden 2.
Which ones?
And they weren't even the new ones. It was definitely the Sportster. I can't remember. I think I did the Fat Bob as well. But yeah, I've ridden, but they were, not this season's, not the newest versions.
Got it.
But I think for me, it's always been, the Sportster always has a pull for me.
Right.
I think that'll be an obvious pick for most people. It's a really easy one. There's a reason it sells so well for Harley as well, because it is your introduction to the brand quite often. And if you're not used to cruisers, it's the fact it's called a Sportster because it's supposed, as a cruiser, it's supposed to be a bit more kind of agile than some others.
But so you mean the Nightster then, or the Sportster S? Because the old air-cooled Sportsters are gone now because they don't pass Euro 5.
Yeah, I know. It's sad. And that is what I rode. But no, so for me, it would be the Sportster S, I think. And you can correct me on that, whether or not actually it does handle slightly better. Is it a little more agile? It certainly looks a little bit.
So I got a chance to ride that one last year, and it is, I mean, it does kind of handle pretty well. It's very low slung. It's quite firm. So it doesn't feel like a wallowy cruiser. It is, quite aggressive. You get probably better suspension as well than you'd find in the rest of the lineup. And I think it's fully adjustable. So it's fairly maneuverable. It's not quite as heavy as some of the big Milwaukee 8-powered bikes.
It's got a higher exhaust as well, right? So maybe the pegs have a little bit more ground clearance or not?
Ground clearance is a little better than average, but the high exhaust I don't think makes a big difference. It just burns your leg.
Well, just from my V9, I remember scraping that bugger constantly, like the pegs, but also if you really got on it, you'd be scraping the exhaust easy. You didn't even have to really try.
Perhaps. I think they just did it because it gives it a bit of a tracker style.
I think that probably, yeah.
The other thing as well, like with a lot of the Harley bikes, obviously got a slightly larger diameter front wheel on quite a few of them. In fact, most of the bikes have a bigger than a 17. They've given it something a bit smaller, but it's proper balloon-sized tires. I think it's similar front and rear. And so I wouldn't say it's the quickest turning bike, but I'm going to say, mate, it is it looks phenomenal. And when you ride it, it gives you that sort of feeling. And it probably is, I would say at the moment, probably the best handling bike in the lineup. So I would say what you're saying is valid.
There you go.
Just with some caveats outside of the Harley lineup. It probably doesn't, if you compare it to an actual naked bike, whatever, obviously feel.
So my second one would be the Fat Bob, I think, for me, unsurprisingly. I think it's I think if you're going to go to sort of the extremes, I like the Sportster because obviously it handles relatively in that bracket, it handles pretty well. And for me, not being a cruiser rider, again, it's a good entry level because it can perform a bit better. You don't have to sacrifice your lean angles and stuff quite as much. And then the Fat Bob for me, I just like how obscenely chonky it is. It just is. There's something really satisfying about a big daddy of a bike cruising along. I think that's always had a pull for me as well. Yeah,
it's a cool looking bike. Interestingly, I think in the last episode we talked about a video that I filmed and didn't publish. I think it might have been the Interceptor. I don't know why this keeps happening in the podcast, but this is another video that I filmed and didn't publish. Maybe it just wasn't as good as I hoped it would be, but it was a back-to-back ride of the Sportster S and the Fat Bob, which are the two bikes you just picked. But the reason I picked them was because they have a similar image, like you say, very chunky and big balloon tires and stuff like that. Yeah, I think you can probably say they've got a comparable amount of like street cred, or they're going to give you the same sort of presence, but they really are very different bikes. Like that liquid cooled engine, the Revolution Max in the Sportster S, it revs up a lot and it feels much more like a Ducati V-twin or a KTM V-twin. The Milwaukee 8 in the Fat Bob is more typical of what you used to find in Harleys. I'd say they've lost a little bit owing to emissions strictness of that sort of exhaust note. But yeah, it's got a bit more vibiness to it and gruntiness, and all the torque is really low in the revs, like, 2000 RPM or something like that. So yeah, it's definitely a different feeling bike. The other massive difference there as well, it's the weight. It's about 300 or 320 kilograms, the Fat Bob. Whereas, yeah, the Sportster S, they've made it a lot more slender. Yeah. And so it does have a lot of presence. The controls are chunkier. It's such a cool bike, mate. I think that's a great shout. And also, I think it suits your vibe a bit as well.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, and I don't mind a heavy bike anymore. I really, really don't. In the right sort of setting. I mean, the wrong times it is a big pain in the arse, but that rarely ever comes up. You just sort of plan a bit better, I suppose, in certain scenarios. But yeah, those two, I think they span very contrasting sort of ends of the spectrum, and I like that. So if I was picking, those are the two that I'm most drawn towards. I would struggle a bit with the third, if I'm honest. If I was looking just within their lineup of Harley, I'd probably go towards a Pan America, but that's not in the cruiser category. So, it
doesn't have to be a cruiser, mate. You can admire the other
then I'll throw that in.
Offerings.
Yeah, no, I'd throw in the Pan America just because, again, if you're looking for something completely different, if you're looking at three completely different bikes within their whole lineup, then you can't get much more contrasting, I think, than those three. It's
proper impressive as well, the Pan America. I think, you look at the abilities, if you look at some of the comparisons on YouTube of like KTM Super Adventure and stuff, off-road versus the Pan America, it doesn't have the same amount of ground clearance. It's not quite as hardcore off-road focus, but I've done quite a few things on the Pan America. I rode to Land's End from Bristol and back in a day, which is a good 400 miles or so. And it was surprisingly good on fuel, and it was really comfortable. I didn't get any aches or anything, and I really enjoyed it, weirdly. Like, it was just motorway slog all day. I just did it as a, can this bike tour. I didn't publish that video either.
Stop teasing people with videos that haven't been out yet.
Mate, I tell you, it really eats into the profit margins of your channel. You can just keep going out and filming things that you don't actually publish. But the other thing I did as well, which I did publish, went to the Mick Exton's Harley-Davidson Adventure Experience last year in Wales. Yeah. And like I say, probably someone like Mick, who's, ex-Dakar, probably can find the limits of it. But he seemed to really enjoy riding it. Obviously, he's probably going to say that, though, because they're contributing probably financially to that setup, or at least bringing in a lot of business. But I think I would agree, like, for certainly someone of my abilities, it's easily capable enough, and it's very planted, and it's with the off-road riding, much like when we did the Africa Twin Adventure Day, you and I, you got to trust it. It feels like a big bike, and you look at like a drop off or a little climb, or they have some kind of like rocky bits there. You think there's no way a big bike like this can get up there, but sometimes if you just, it's normally you that fucks it up, basically. And if you weren't on the bike and you pointed it where you wanted it to go and just, tape the throttle open slightly, it'd probably do it. It's just when you freak out and grab the brakes or give it loads of gas. So I was really impressed with it, and I think it's not a bad shout. I wonder how they've been selling, though. I haven't seen any sales figures.
I've seen a fair amount of them. I don't, not that that's anecdotal completely, but in terms of like the span of bikes that I see around, and very rare, you see them in different areas. So obviously you see more of your adventure bikes outside of London. You don't tend to see quite as many around this area because they don't make as much sense. But down in like Devon and Wales and stuff, I've definitely seen some. So they've sold a couple.
Well, what was interesting about it as well is, like, when I first rode one, I borrowed it from the Cardiff dealership. And the interesting thing about Harley shops is, like, they have a lot of community. Even on a weeknight, I'd go there on a weekday in the summer, and it'd be light enough and warm enough for an evening ride. And as I was leaving at maybe 4 or 5 o'clock, you'd get riders coming down on their cruisers and congregating and having a chat, looking at the bikes, and then they go and do an hour or two together. And what was super interesting about the Pan America was I was one of the first people to take their demo out. And I got back, and then some of the guys that are normally on the big Taurus with a lot of chrome, the customized Sportsters and breakouts and, everything in between, who, they're wearing Harley t-shirts and leathers and, that sort of vibe. Bandanas, maybe, leather waistcoats, that sort of stuff. You'd never see them on a GS in a million years. And yet, as soon as I rolled up, they all kind of stood around and they were interested in that sort of ability the Pan America has to drop the rear suspension when you come to a standstill, because maybe they've looked, you know, so it is a slightly older crowd. Maybe it was because it was a weeknight as well. So you've just mainly got retired people. But yeah, I think
you're saying they need some help getting on and off the bike. Is that what you're saying?
Well, a lot of them like to ride with their wife on the back as well of the cruisers. And it's really easy for a passenger to get on and off no matter what age they are. And I think they were sort of like, oh, can I have a sit on it? How does it lower? How does it come back up? And then, you know, some people had their, that sounds very like gender normy, doesn't it? To say, oh, their wives go on the back. But that's just what I observed that day.
I know what you mean. Yeah. Unfortunately, it is the norm. It is more common.
Certainly amongst that group, it was. And so they would have their wife kind of like sit on the back and try it out. And I just can't see them rolling up to a BMW dealership and doing the same with a GS. I think it's just not their image. But
like you say, you don't see the same community. You're right, though. It's weird. I went to the one in Watford or close to Watford, and it was the same thing. It was just a random Wednesday or something similar, you know, in the week, middle of the day. And there was people there. And I was like, what are you doing? You wouldn't get that. If you went to like the Triumph dealership or you went to like a, I don't know, Yamaha, Honda, whatever, you wouldn't get the same sort of crowd. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah,
they're a funny bunch sometimes. I remember in London, I went to one of the shops and I was on like my Bonnie or something, but I tested I can't remember what it was actually, lowrider or something like that. And then a few of the guys outside just hanging out were like, oh, you're going to get a proper bike sort of thing.
Of course.
But it's just a bit of bants, which I don't mind.
No, I don't mind either.
But yeah, it's definitely a scene.
What are your 3 picks? What are you entering their field with?
Yeah, I think out of the lineup at the moment, I mean, ever since I had a Goldwing, I've always really liked the sort of fully loaded Tourer, you know, with all the luggage and a big comfy seat on the back. In fact, we tested that out 2 Up, didn't we? I found that video the other day of me, I gave you a lift to work one day in London.
Yeah, it was a fun day. That was the best commute. Yeah, it was great. I loved it. I was sat there listening to the radio, watching you trying to squeeze that thing through traffic was quite fun.
Probably a bit scary when you're on the back.
Yeah, a little bit.
But certainly something like there's 2 really that catch my eye. The Ultra Limited, which has got a single round headlight, looks a little bit more traditional. The Road Glide is a similar bike. I mean, a lot of the bikes with the same platform are quite similar in the lineup, but the Road Glide has like twin headlights and I think it might be a frame mounted fairing as well.
The Road Glide I've seen more of, I think. Yeah, definitely. With the twin.
The slightly sort of traditional vibe of the Ultra Limited looks really cool to me. And I think they're doing it in a 1/20th, to a kind of anniversary edition with a sort of crimson red paint job and then this Art Deco style gold tank badge, which for me, it's sort of like, it's not the headline. There's the CVO Road Glide Limited with the full anniversary edition paint job that's a little bit more intricate. And that's 50 grand. But I think they're making a few of the other bikes in a sort of simpler version of the anniversary paint job. And it looks really, really nice. And I just love the idea of cruising in absolute comfort. I just love big bikes like that. There's others that I've ridden like the R18 Transcontinental.
Yes.
And, they're not for handling, they're not for parking, they're not for filtering, but it gives you this ultimate sort of king of the road sensation. And also the distance you can do in actual complete comfort on some of those bikes is pretty impressive. So I do really like the look of the Ultra Limited this year in that anniversary spec. Ooh, I'm not sure what else. I'm going to have a little think here. So that one that has always appealed to me is the Heritage Classic. It's one of the most traditional looking bikes in the lineup. It's got that kind of big front mudguard that kind of comes around a little bit like what you used to get on the Indian bikes.
Nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what I like about this bike as well is it's got one of those windscreens that's sort of classic American movie.
American cops and stuff.
Yes.
Often you see them, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But what's really nice about that one as well is it pulls off, it lifts off that windscreen really, really easily. Right. And so it really transforms the look of the bike from something that's got that, almost police vibe.
Yes.
To like a naked cruiser. And of course, if you've got the luggage that clips on and off, that can transform the look as well. So That looks really nice to me in terms of, you get the Milwaukee 8, so it's still got a little bit of that, like it's air and oil cooled, that sort of old school charm. It makes all that power really down low, and it's got the more traditional look. In fact, both the Ultra Limited and the Heritage Classic are quite sort of traditional looking bikes. What else would I pick? I feel like I would have to mix it up, but...
You got two similar-ish ones there, yeah.
I think the Sportster S also... I'm trying to pick something a little bit different to you, but the Sportster S just looks...
Picture us both out. We can both have the same bike. We can both go out for a ride together, turn up at the cafe, just different colours maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I would Bagsy the grey.
Oh, good, because that's not the colour I'd get either.
What would you go for?
There you go. Perfect. I actually quite like, looking at it on this, I mean, can't beat black. I just like black anyway. And it does look good with the gold as well. The gold kind of helps it stand out. But yeah, I think the blue looks quite nice.
I think it's just also a bike that I'd just like to put some real miles in on and kind of understand a little bit more what it's like to live with. Like, can you go out for a sort of Sunday blast, quick ride type thing? I think you probably can. Like I think it'd be quite fun to ride like that on a regular basis. I think, like I said, the handling has its quirks, so you'd want to get to know it a bit. But I think it'd be fun to ride like that. As for sort of just general, for posing, literally, if you just want to get photos for Instagram and, just ride it to work and stuff and just want to show up on a cool looking bike, I think it ticks that box. It's just a comfort thing. Like, honestly, the rear shocks are quite something in terms of firmness. A lot of the Indian bikes are like that.
Thin seat, I think, as well, right? On that
Mate,
one.
very thin.
Yeah, not a lot of cushion. Yeah, it doesn't. The old one wasn't uncomfortable, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a comfortable bike to do distance, especially. If you're just popping around town, short blasts, fine, but it's not. It isn't the most comfortable position of a bike. No. But at least it had a thicker seat.
Yeah,
and softer
definitely. So they'd be my picks. We've converged there a little bit on one of them, but that'd be quite a fleet between us, mate.
Imagine that. Yeah. What's that? What we're dealing with here is about 100 grand in it. More than that, 150.
Oh, easily. Probably. Yeah. It's a lot of money. So
yours are taking up a lot of that. I'm not going to lie. You go for the big hitters,
the punchy ones, definitely. But hopefully we'll get a few of those for the channel and do some reviews this coming year. Certainly the Nightster specials on the list, and there's some that I'd like to revisit as well. And I do believe actually they've got something else in the works. When they launched all these last week, right at the end of the video, there's something hinting that there's more coming. So we'll look forward to seeing what that is.